I'll probably have some more questions thereafter, but one of my takeaways after reading the report was that as an institution, policing has been around a long time, a very long time. And because of that established history, institutions like that, require time to change, to react. It's not going to be anything overnight. Your comments both alluded to that. Uh, Again, and I understand the need for continued change. The operative word being continued. You have both acknowledged that steps have been taken, to change the culture at the police department. And when I say culture, some of the things that you included were, use of force, de-escalation training, et cetera. There was one specific question that I had, and admittingly, I don't know what our general orders say. This is more of a legal question. When it comes to use of force, and I do recall when tasers were new to the scene, okay, they were marketed as a, non-lethal, use, for police, right? An option. And in some, contexts, they were, viewed as, the term wasn't used so often back then, but as a ways to de-escalate, a situation. And now, again, you'd said, we're in a different place, right? We're in a different America. There have been incidences that have changed, us, as a nation, how we view interactions of the police and the public. So specifically, I'd like to know that, do our general orders specifically say that it's only for people who are actively resisting that the use is authorized for tasers? And that includes brandishing.
Yeah, I think that's a question for the chief, and I'm going to step away here. Let him answer that.
Mayor and Council, Neil Noakes, Chief of Police, Forward Police Department. It's an interesting dynamic you bring up when we talk about when tasers were first brought out into policing. The belief at the time was if you showed your taser and it made someone not show aggression, that it did its job. And we found even pulling a firearm was not as effective as pulling a taser. People didn't want to be tased. But what we're finding now, and we find through years of use, years of training, years of policy and feedback from community members and professionals like this, what we thought was not accurate. This was something in the policing profession that was even tracked, was just the display effective. Well, understanding now that that display actually escalates the situation, that's the opposite of what we want to do. And we have updated our policies when it comes to taser. My apologies, I can't quote that to you word for word. We can get you a copy of that. But we're making sure officers are using their taser in the appropriate ways and not just brandishing it to show that they have that force.
Okay. And Chief, while you're up there, you may be a good person to answer this. You gentlemen brought it up. An interesting point of feedback that you got from the public in terms of wanting to know their patrol officers, knowing, our current force levels and how difficult it is at times to have adequate coverage. And I'm not speaking, for you, Chief, but how do you do that? I mean, MPOs can come to crime prevention fairs, can come to neighborhood meetings, and they do. They do take time for that. And those are good opportunities for, the folks that do live in the neighborhoods to know who their neighborhood patrol officers are. But when it comes to patrol, that's a different animal altogether. And while, generally I'm supportive of the idea, how do you implement that and not impact, your primary duty, which is to be out there and make sure that things, stay orderly and people are safe? How do you do that?
Sure, I'll address it first. The chief may want to comment on this as well. It starts from a patrol perspective with implementing what we refer to as beat accountability. That's assigning the same officers to the same area day in and day out, so that people who live in that area have a chance to, when they interact with them, have a chance to meet them, have a chance to see them, become familiar with them face to face. The officers do the same. They learn the members of the community, who's who, what's what. They also learn a lot about the intricacies within the neighborhoods and are able to address those intimacies and intricacies. But it starts with beat accountability, trying to assign the same people, the same areas, day in and day out, in between the patrol bid period. It happens in departments large and small around the country, but you have to develop and design your patrol deployment philosophy around this concept of beat accountability.
And that is something we have done as far as assigning beat officers. It's something the department got away from several years ago, but we've been back to the beat system for quite a while now. As far as what you mentioned with some of the difficulties, part of it is just that community policing philosophy. Every call you go on, you're a problem solver. You're trying to help a community member solve a problem in their neighborhood to your assigned beat. Because staffing levels are low, as we know, we've got about 100 vacancies right now. There are times that beats go unfilled. There are times if someone is off duty and it's a busy beat, we may have to move someone to cover that beat. Ideally, we would have the same person on every beat every single day. We are not able to do that, first of all, just because we have to give people a day off, and because of some of the staffing challenges we have. What I want to do is commend the city for what you're doing as far as addressing that, so we can have more officers out there. So instead of going call to call to call to call, may actually have a little more time to invest in each call they go on to actually deal with the problems the citizens are facing.
All right. And then my final question, if I may. When you talk about lack of robust accountability, okay, you know, that's an important metric. And I don't know if there's a single or a short list number of things that impede that from happening. I think our police officers do want to do the right thing and do endeavor to do the right thing. But what are the obstacles there? Is it administrative? Is it a mountain of paperwork that you'd have to go through? Because it's, you know, it's one thing to say, well, okay, you lack robust accountability, or it could be better. All right, well, with that said, how do you implement it? I mean, you mentioned one thing, the use of audits, for example, to check use of force patterns of noncompliance. Are those two related? Is that what you're talking about, or am I missing something else?
I would say they are cousins. Accountability starts with supervisors who conduct reviews of offense reports, reviews of police officer documents, reviews of body-worn camera videos, that when they see conduct or behavior that's not consistent with what policy requires, that they call that out, that they address that with the officer or with the shift or in whatever ways are appropriate. What we see more often than not is when we, the committee, have seen misconduct or improper tactics applied to a use of force, we recognize that there has been an internal review process where the supervisors, where the chain of command has reviewed this and nobody said anything about what we saw. So we believe that when supervisors see conduct that should be addressed or changed, it starts with them addressing it, with the city, with the police department having a formal system for supervisors to hold officers accountable, and then supervisors themselves be held accountable when they are not properly applying accountability measures. Now, one of the problems that we found that does impact this is the city has very good data systems, but the systems aren't used to the extent of their capabilities. And so a lot of what can be known is not known because the data systems and the data within the systems aren't properly addressed and consumed. And so the use of data systems can, the existing systems without investing in new systems can actually enhance the accountability that's applied by the chains of command and the supervision. So that's one example of what can be done to address